my top 10 favorite WrestleManias. Number 10 is WrestleMania 10. All right, I'm going to start off with that one. I did not watch this as it was happening. In fact, my next entry, my number 9 entry, was the very first WrestleMania I watched in real time. But I've since went back. I had a entire DVD collection of every single WrestleMania. But 10 I found very interesting. Of course, this is the 10th anniversary of WrestleMania. And they did it in the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, which is always a nice touch. They'll probably never do that again because the Madison Square Garden is just so small compared to what they're aiming for now. My 3 favorite matches from that card in specific order. So my number 3, or letter C, would be the Bret versus Yokozuna main event match. Yokozuna was one of the greatest big men of all time. And him and Bret in the rematch from the WrestleMania 9, this was much, much better than that previous year. And it would have been the second time that night that we'd see both these gentlemen work. So you're getting a double treat here. Obviously, Yokozuna beat Lex Luger earlier in the night. But the other Bret match is still to come. B is Shawn Michaels versus Razor Ramon, the very first ladder match, at least in WWF history. It set the bar. And think about the various ladder matches and variations of ladder matches that we would get over the next couple years. These two started it all, and it was iconic. It's crazy to think, though, how simple jumping off like a ladder, how simple it seems now, but how amazing and unnatural it was back in 1990. I think it was 4. I think it would have been 1994 or 5. The years in math, it's weird, but regardless, back at WrestleMania 10, jumping off of a ladder was a big, big deal, and now we get all sorts of crazy moves off of ladders. But these guys, I view this match like the very first Star Wars lightsaber battle between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in A New Hope. So simple, but it would set the standard for what's to come. And my favorite match from WrestleMania 10 is actually the opener. And to me, this might be one of the great. This is a top 10. There will be a time where I rank WrestleMania matches. This is definitely going to be on that list. It's the Owen Hart versus Bret Hart opener. God, like, best brother match I've ever watched. Brother versus brother match I've ever watched. Because these two are two of the best, technically sound, great gimmicks, great characters. And Owen Hart getting the win would set the tone for the rest of the night, because now Bret's going into this main event match against Yokozuna or Lex Luger, because we didn't know at the time, with a loss to Owen Hart, on his mind, in storyline, of course. But this win would be huge for Owen, and it would set up a whole summer of feuds. I believe they met at SummerSlam in a cage match that year. So yeah, that is WrestleMania 10 is my number 10, and those are my 3 favorite matches from it. Number 9, as I stated, was my very first WrestleMania that I watched in real time, and it was WrestleMania 20, also in Madison Square Garden. Okay? So this is, like I said, I came back to wrestling in June of 2003, and everything that had stemmed from there, and it eventually led to this event in March of 2004. And I remember I had a friend, Kyle, who lived across the street, and he had the DirecTV, he had the pay-per-view option. We would go over and watch, and he would actually record these pay-per-views for me, and I had it on VHS for the longest time. But I'm very, very fond of this WrestleMania, and it's really not a bad card. Like, it's really not a bad show at all. There's a lot of good matches on it. 2 tag team 4-corner tag team matches. The return of The Undertaker versus Kane, which was the coolest thing for me, because when I came back to watching wrestling, I was surprised that The Undertaker was doing the motorcycle shtick, which I don't hate by any means, but to see him come back as the Dead Man was just so cool. But my 3 favorite matches from WrestleMania 20. C, John Cena versus The Big Show. It For this one, like, it wasn't like a technically sound match, but knowing how hard John Cena had worked in the previous calendar year, especially, watching it, he had matches against The Undertaker and Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero and so many others. It was cool to see, like, this guy's hard work pay off. In a more recent context, like watching LA Knight win the U.S. Championship from Logan Paul, because you knew how hard he's been working at getting his character down and fine-tuning his craft. To see John Cena win the U.S. Championship in the opening match of WrestleMania was awesome. My second favorite match on the card was the Eddie Guerrero versus Kurt Angle one. These two made magic together so many times throughout the years. But very fun ending. Happy to see Eddie Guerrero, have the championship, and Kurt Angle's one of the best wrestlers of all time. So a lot of magic there, and of course the main event for that pay-per-view, which unfortunately is it's a little bit tainted, but I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like this match wasn't one of the best WrestleMania main events of all time. Chris Benoit versus Shawn Michaels versus Triple H. HBK and Shawn Michaels are two of the best entertainers of all. HBK and Triple H are two of the best entertainers of all time. And Chris Benoit was on his way up. The dude had been working hard and grinding for years and years and years, and he belonged. Like, he just belonged. And that ending was great. It's so sad that hug at the end of the show between him and Eddie, between Benoit and Eddie, will really never get highlighted again on WWE television, although the clips and everything are still there. It was just emotional moment of two guys who came from WCW and just couldn't find a way to break through, and then all of a sudden they're at the top of WWE in a land where the giants ruled, right? The big guys, the big men ruled, and they were on top, and it was really cool. It's sad that that whole dynamic has changed. Moving on to my number 8, it's WrestleMania 26. I remember watching this in my pal Vince's house, in his room. We're hanging out in his room. Me and my friend Billy and Vince all watched it together. Great show. It was a really great show. It was marked by the end of a career, but there were some great title matches. Bret Hart came back, even though it wasn't the Bret Hart that we knew and loved. It was still really cool to see Bret Hart wrestling again and beating up on Vince McMahon. Like, what a great storyline. Even though the match stunk, like, what a great storyline that was to experience that. But my 3 favorite matches from WrestleMania 26, we got the long-awaited Cena versus Batista feud, which should have happened years prior, and they tried it. They really hurried it for one of the SummerSlams. I forget which year, but they did a good job. Batista came back, turned heel, and he didn't come back, but he was there. He turned heel and had this new edge about him, and I loved it. And it was pretty good. A lot of good storytelling when it came to this. Years and years in the making. My number 2 favorite match from this card was the Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes versus Ted DiBiase match. Orton was just starting to turn babyface again, but I love when he's his babyface version because he doesn't really switch up who he was, and he was just coming off of this great run as like this menacing, psychotic Viper, character, and this was him introducing it. He was no longer just the legend killer. He had a different edge to him. And Legacy was splitting up, and he was face, but you could tell he was still him. And it was really good. And he won the match, as rightfully so. But DiBiase fizzled out of the wrestling business, but it's kind of cool to look back at this and see where Randy Orton's legacy is now, and of course where Cody Rhodes and how far he's come. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's his first WrestleMania. And he's come a long way since. It's very cool to see. And, of course, the best match on that card was HBK's final match. All right, him versus Undertaker in the main event. All sorts of false finishes. You're it's career versus streak, and you're really debating, is HBK really going to retire here? In hindsight, being 2020, it kind of made sense, but they really made you believe several times over that Shawn Michaels is going to win that match. And that's the magic of pro wrestling. So that whole pay-per-view, WrestleMania 26, that's why it comes in at number 8. Number 7. To me, like, this is a pretty dang good card. The main event is, again, a top 10er. Or not the main event, but the Rock versus Hogan match is one of a top 10 WrestleMania match. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But WrestleMania 18, really, really great card. It was like that. It had that WCW versus WWF kind of vibe because the NWO had just came over. There were several other remnants from WCW still around. Like I know DDP wrestled Christian. Booker T, I think, wrestled Edge at this one. RVD had a match. A lot of kind of crossover here. But WrestleMania 18, my 3 favorite matches. Number 3 was the Triple H versus Chris Jericho actual main event. The Triple H return story was great, and even though they shouldn't have gone on last, they still did a pretty good job, despite the crowd really being gassed and exhausted after everything they had watched at that point. Undertaker versus Ric Flair. Like, this is Ric Flair's big comeback match, right? He'd been around. He did the co-owner thing with Vince, but his first WrestleMania back, and he's going up against The Undertaker. And for a generation of wrestling fans who didn't really see Rick in his prime, this was cool to witness. This was cool to watch. And they had one heck of a match, and it also got to see an awesome Arn Anderson spinebuster, probably for the last time, to be perfectly honest with you. But the number 1 match from this is a no-brainer. I already mentioned it. The Rock versus Hogan, generation versus generation. Yesteryear's main guy, yesteryear's main, the face of it, and The Rock, who at that point probably was the guy. I think there's storyline, there's behind-the-scenes story that Steve Austin had an opportunity to do it, and he turned it down. He didn't think it would be a good match, but The Rock went out there, and they killed it. It was it was amazing, and a lot of cool moments from it. The Rock coming out on top, and eventually Hogan getting cheered like crazy, even though he had he was the villain. Him and the NWO, they hit The Rock with a semi and all sorts of wild and crazy stuff. It was a crazy build-up. But WrestleMania 18 is my number 7. Number 6 is WrestleMania X7. A lot of people do say this is one of the best WrestleManias of all time. I won't argue with that. It's hard. I think if you're in the moment, this might, watching it in the moment, but retroactively, there's a part of me that thinks WrestleMania X7 might be a little overrated, but it does still make the top 10 because there are some great matches on here. My 3rd favorite match from WrestleMania X7 is the Stone Cold versus The Rock match. I think it was really good. I just hated the ending. I hated the Austin heel turn. It was just awkward and weird and unnecessary, and I don't think the match needed that at all. But it really started the downfall of Stone Cold. Within maybe a year and some change, he was out of the WWF. He was frustrated. His character had taken a hit by this heel turn, and it was just hard to picture him with Vince McMahon. It was just such a conflict and night and day difference. But it also made The Rock the guy going forward, even though he was set to do Hollywood and he's starting to appear in some films and whatnot. The Rock became the guy after taking this loss. So really became the guy. So that's an important angle. My second favorite match on WrestleMania X7 was the TLC match, the very famous, well-documented TLC match between the Dudleys, Hardys, and Edge and Christian. We talked about Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon setting the standard And these guys raise the bar. And there'll be some other great WrestleMania, or not just WrestleMania, but great ladder matches that came after this. But this was insane and absolutely a show stealer. And for me, who's a wrestling purist, like I love the technical side of professional wrestling, Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit was really, really good and my favorite WrestleMania X7 match. There was a lot of potential show stealers on this card. Obviously, the TLC one stands out. It's like watching a Michael Bay movie, just big explosions, this car crash vibe, and whatnot. But for me, to see two guys who can go out there and put on a technical showcase with the storyline, mind you, there was storyline to it. It's just two guys out there to prove that they are the best best pure technician professional wrestlers in the world. They went out and crushed it, and that is my favorite match from X7. My number 5 is WrestleMania 3. This is my earliest match, or earliest WrestleMania, oldest WrestleMania that I have on this card, on this list, and it's a really good one. The crowd attendance number is often a little inflated. There's some controversy about that, but this was a nice recovery for the WWF at the time because WrestleMania 2 was not great. WrestleMania 1 was wonderful, but WrestleMania 2, spreading it out over 3 cities, it's often heralded. It's usually rated as one of the bottom 5 WrestleManias of all time. WrestleMania 2 is, but 3 brought it back together and it was anchored by one of my matches on the top 3. But also there was a really great technical match there in it that I think is the best match. And obviously I'm sure people can guess what I'm talking about. But what a great card and great aura. I love the imagery of seeing, from the top row, just seeing all of those people in there. It was an amazing production, and they made it seem so much bigger than it actually was. But let's go. Look, my third favorite match on this card, it's really a 2-match pay-per-view event, WrestleMania. But I didn't mind Honky Tonk Man versus Jake the Snake Roberts. I kind of dug Honky Tonk Man, even though he's an interesting character. And I've actually met him before. He's hilarious in real life, and I love listening and watching some of his shoot interviews. But him versus Jake the Snake was great and actually helped set old Roy Wayne Ferris to becoming the longest reigning, at the time, for a very long time, the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion. Because not too long after this event, he would start his reign of terror, you could say. My second favorite match from this event was Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. That was the big build. They hyped it up so good, and even though the match wasn't great, it was the actual stuff that happened in the ring wasn't all that great. The build-up and storyline around it is what made it, and that is okay too. Andre the Giant turning heel after being this beloved journeyman wrestler who traveled all across the world, being one of the best special attractions and big men in professional wrestling history. For him to turn bad against his good friend Hulk Hogan, it was it meant a lot, and it was a great moment. Watching Hogan body slam Andre and hitting the leg drop and the 1, 2, 3. Special stuff right there. That's what WrestleMania is all about. And my number 1 favorite match from that card, again, I just bragged about Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit, being a technical masterpiece. This is way bigger than that. It's the Savage versus Steamboat IC title match. Especially too, knowing how Savage used to like to prepare his matches. A lot of it was not on the fly. It was a lot of pre-planning, a lot of working out and rehearsing this stuff. But these two crushed it, and it is probably the best match in WrestleMania history. WWE don't get a lot of matches that are like this. You don't get a lot of technical showcases that are just pure wrestling, because a lot of it nowadays is about the showmanship and the theatrics and whatnot. These two dudes just went out and try to out wrestle each other, and it was so, they made it look so complex and complicated, but it was so simple. I loved it. I really do. I love rewatching it as well. So that's my number 5. Number 4 is my most modern WrestleMania. It's WrestleMania 31. This was 2015. I remember a lot of good stuff coming from this. It was a great card, top to bottom. It really, truly was. My third favorite match of WrestleMania 31 was the IC title ladder match. And this was a year after Daniel Bryan had, reached his pinnacle. But he would outlast a WrestleMania IC title ladder match against the likes of Wade Barrett and, Brody Lee, Luke Harper, and so many other top names at that time. And he would get his hand raised at WrestleMania just one more time, from this match. And again, car crash, multi-men car crashes, and it was good, exciting stuff. Randy Orton versus Seth Rollins, another WrestleMania where Orton's kind of starting to turn the corner a little bit. He's starting to become a baby face, and his back and forth with Seth Rollins throughout most of that year was really good. And Orton's greatness as a babyface is that he's never really switched up his character, right? There's tweaks here and there, but he's still the psychotic, vicious viper that he is as a bad guy, as a heel. So, and obviously one of the greatest RKOs of all time. And my number 1 is the main event, the Lesnar versus Roman Reigns match, where Seth Rollins eventually comes in and cashes in Money in the Bank and ends up walking away. They call it the heist of the century. There's been a lot of Lesnar versus Reigns WrestleMania main events. A lot of them are bleh, but Seth Rollins spiced this one up and surprised the heck out of everybody. Much like Bret Hart taking the L and WrestleMania 10 in the opener, like Seth losing against Orton, you never, ever seen it coming. And then he just comes out, interjects himself, and sets himself up for a great year. Feuds with Randy Orton and feuds with a lot of great other wrestlers throughout under his reign as champion. So I think that might be the WrestleMania 2 with Sting and Triple H was a part of this. A great WrestleMania, and my favorite modern one. My number 3, I have a couple ways I can go about this. I'm going to put WrestleMania 30 here. All right. And yeah, these next 3 could all be number 1s. But WrestleMania 30, 2014, is the first WrestleMania I watched with my now in-laws, which is always a treat. But this was the first WrestleMania where I really felt that fans won. They fought for this WrestleMania. And what I mean by that is, if you don't remember, if you weren't a fan or you weren't following it much at the time, CM Punk left. He was frustrated, and Daniel Bryan's yes movement was the all the rage. People were doing it at college sports games, the yes chants and whatnot. And it felt like they were purposely trying to hinder him and not let him succeed. But he became undeniable. And listen, a lot of things happen backstage where they let us bookers, writers, whatever, they let us think that we altered the destiny of it. I don't know for a fact if Daniel Bryan was going to be walking out of WrestleMania as champion, but it's sure they let us feel like it was. And the yes movement was it was so cool to be a part of. For WrestleMania 30, my 3 favorite matches, that opening one with Daniel Bryan and Triple H. For Triple H to have to, D-Bry to pull double duty, he had to win to be in the main event. The winner of this match got to be in the main event. And he went 25 minutes with Triple H. And for Triple H to put over somebody at WrestleMania, especially somebody small, it was a very intense feud that was months in the building, tons of antagonizing, and for Daniel Bryan to come out on top and win that match, it started off the night great, because Triple H, even though he had this role as the kind of like a Vince McMahon type authority, doing the authority shtick, he was so hated again, and for Daniel Bryan to overcome him after months and months of torture was great. My number 2 favorite match on this card was the Daniel Bryan versus Randy Orton versus Batista match. All right, it just one after another, but again, feeling like the fans had like earned this result. And unfortunately, in a couple weeks, it would all be for naught. Daniel Bryan would be hurt and out of be injured until probably like December or January that year. But yeah, what a night for Daniel Bryan, right? He wins over Triple H in the opener, then he beats up on Orton and Batista, basically taking out 3/4 of Evolution. He was so popular that it forced Batista to be a bad guy, and it forced people to not like and root for Batista. And Orton was in his peak here. This is peak heel Orton. Just slimy, slithery, Viper Randy Orton. Love this run for him as champion. Really some of his best stuff. But having D-Bry come out and make Batista tap in the end was significant. So, and number 1, the biggest shocker of that night, undoubtedly so, is the Brock Lesnar Undertaker match. I don't think anybody seen that coming. I don't think anybody ever seen the streak coming to a close. That match was unbelievable. Hard-hitting, big moves, and a tremendous upset. It's still mind-boggling. I mean, it makes sense. I know a lot of people are like, oh, the streak, how dare they break the streak? Or somebody else could have used breaking the streak. But Brock was real. Brock was real, ferocious, and it made sense, I guess, for what it was. But one of the best WrestleMania moments of all time. So that's my number 1 for WrestleMania 30. And yes. Number 2. This is tough too, but I'm going to put WrestleMania 19 here. WrestleMania 19 was a great card, and the whole feeling of it, being in Seattle, being like that long entrance ramp, was it gave it a special feeling. This is the WrestleMania before I really started watching, but everything that happened here set the tone for the rest of the year, and eventually when I started watching again in June of 2003, I was enjoying the fruits and repercussions of this show. So, a lot of great matches on this card. My number 3 favorite is the Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho one. This is Shawn Michaels' first WrestleMania back since WrestleMania 14. And him and Chris Jericho put on a banger. They had a great build-up, a great storyline about Jericho being inspired, wanting to be like Shawn Michaels, and it was a really, really good match. Not too many other words to describe it. It ended with the hug and then Chris Jericho kneeing Shawn Michaels in the balls, but it was one heck of a match. My second favorite one from WrestleMania 19 is Austin versus The Rock. This is Steve Austin's final match, and it was actually supposed to go on last, but there were some issues. Stone Cold was in the hospital like that the night before, that morning, and the whole match was at risk. But one heck of a way to go out. I just rewatched it not too long ago. The finishers back and forth, stealing each other's finishers, and whatnot. It was a perfect end to Stone Cold's professional wrestling career. And my favorite match from it is another top tenner for me. And even though there was a botch with the Shooting Star Press, Kurt Angle versus Brock Lesnar is one of my favorite main events in WrestleMania history. To see these two guys who actually inspired me to start doing amateur wrestling and picking up in high school, these two very successful collegiate wrestlers, and obviously one of them in an Olympic level. see them wrestle and show off what they can do, especially knowing what Kurt Angle was going through too. He had a broken neck. He had to go away, and he had a legit excuse to not wrestle at WrestleMania 19. And for him to go out there and have the match that they kind of did, the quality match that Kurt and Brock had, and again, shooting star press botch or not, this is fantastic, and it helped set Brock Lesnar into being the face that they want him to be for a little while, and then they kind of just they pulled the rug out from under him on that and made him a heel, and the rest was history. He would disappear for a very, very long time. And my number one favorite WrestleMania, there is not a bad match on this card, is WrestleMania 21. In Hollywood, it felt like a true reset. Okay, it's like when a team, like a football team or any sports team, they trade off their best player or some of their best players for draft pick assets, and they start fresh. They start this whole rebuild, and that's what WrestleMania 21 felt like, because he had two young up-and-coming superstars that achieved became the faces of WWE, faces of various, the different brands, SmackDown and Raw. And he had a lot of young versus old and some other just insanely good matches. The opener with Eddie and Ray, the tag team champions going head to head in a very awesome, high flying yet technical showcase. I didn't put Batista versus Triple H on here, but as my top three, but it very well could have been. The storyline building up to that was incredible, and whatnot, and help Batista really set him to superstardom. Just from the Royal Rumble on that year, he was the guy. Incredible look, and he's one of the honestly better big men in pro wrestling. These better muscular big men that can actually kind of go in a sense, and was able to be exciting and powerful with his size. But my three favorite matches from WrestleMania 21. Third is the Money in the Bank ladder match. The very first Money in the Bank ladder match, you had Edge, Kane, Chris Benoit, Jericho, Shelton Benjamin, and Christian in this match. And there was some very fun, exciting high spots, high-risk spots. Shelton Benjamin was like the MVP of this match. All the flips and crazy stunts that he did, running up ladders and whatnot. I love showing this match off to people, watching it with others and seeing what they think. And you get Edge, really, who is really he's kind of coming off of he's starting to really dive into this rated R superstar character gimmick and become one of the most hated heels in the company, which nobody could have seen a few years prior with his, the 5-second poses with Christian. But great match. My number two favorite is the John Cena versus JBL match. JBL had been champ for 9 months at that point, probably give or take a month or two here. But JBL actually had a really, really good reign as champion, and you tuned in every single week to every single pay-per-view that he was on in hopes that he would lose. And I'm glad that they waited till WrestleMania for him to be the guy to springboard John Cena into being the face of the company. And crazy. It's just crazy. A match that seemed maybe unlikely a year prior, right? Because JBL wasn't JBL at WrestleMania 20. He was just Bradshaw, and he was with the APA alongside Farouk, competing in that Four Corners tag team title match. And then all of a sudden he was the top heel in on SmackDown at the very least, and one of the best heels in the industry at that point. And John Cena's the guy to take him down. And this was, now John Cena's the face, and many great years of pro wrestling under his guidance, under his leadership in a sense, but he definitely deserved to be the face. One of the hardest working guys of all time with all the Make-A-Wish stuff and whatnot. But my favorite match of WrestleMania 21 was the Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels. What a match. What a dream crossover that you would never see coming. But, you got Mr. WrestleMania, one of the greatest sports entertainers of all time, versus one of the greatest technical wrestlers of all time. And Kurt Angle was really hitting his prime here. With this ferocity, this bitter Kurt Angle, just straps down. And Taker versus Orton was on this card. Like, this was a great one, and undoubtedly my number one, though. But there it is, everybody, my top 10 favorite WrestleManias.